Testing, testing. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mrs. Werner?
Here.
Mr. Venuto?
Here.
Mr. Ledwin?
Here.
Mrs. Notch?
Here.
Ms. Sheehan?
Here.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Zexer?
Here.
Mr. Cataldo?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the minutes of the July 27th meeting.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Notch, seconded by Ms. Sheehan. Mr. Ledwin?
Abstain.
Okay, Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, a motion to approve Joseph Bogle, 102 First Avenue resolution.
I make the motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Sheehan, and I'm sorry, was that Mr. Cataldo who seconded? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Venuto seconds. Mr. Ledwin?
Abstain.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
A motion to approve the Samuel and Lisa Stroud, 227 Grant Street resolution.
Make the motion?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Sheehan, seconded by Mrs. Notch. Mr. Ledwin?
Abstain.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, before we have our applications tonight, we're going to have a short Zoom presentation about the HPC new standards. And after the presentation, we'll go right into our applications. We'll be presented with hard copies of the design standards, and if any of the members have questions after they read the hard copies, we'll discuss how we'll go about that. So tonight's just a presentation, and we'll go into our application.
Okay.
And
Am I in your way, Tom?
Okay, here's Stephen.
A little louder?
I can talk a little bit louder. Is that okay?
Much better, thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll get started. I'll be pretty brief. Thank you again for accommodating me this evening. My name is Stephen Smolin from Architectural Heritage Consultants, and I'm the city's consultant for the design standards project that's been going on for the last 6 months. And part of the project is reaching out to the zoning board to just let you know about the standards, how you can access them, and a little bit more about them. So the project has 3 different phases. The first was the design standards. Many of you are familiar with the previous version of the standards, which were adopted in 2002. The new standards went into effect on August 15th. Another component of this project is the website enhancement. You'll notice that the HPC's portion of the website is sort of revamped, and we're going to be doing a little bit more with that in the coming weeks. And the third phase of the project is what I'm here for tonight, and also in the coming weeks, we'll be doing outreach to the local realtors, architects, contractors, and homeowners in town. Just to give you a quick overview of the project, it started back in February. There's a subcommittee of about 15 people from various stakeholder groups, people from the zoning board, planning board, council. We've been meeting 1 or 2 times per month to discuss improvements to the standards. A draft of those standards was approved by the Historic Preservation Commission back in April. and a final back in May. City Council had a first and second reading, with the planning board review in between back in July. And now for August and September, it's all about public outreach and implementation, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So just a chronology of your design standards, which are award-winning, and we're really quite a privilege to get to update. Historic preservation domestically can really trace its roots back to the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act. From that, the Secretary of the Interior developed standards for rehabilitation back in the 70s. It was also at that time Cape May published a really early and important preservation document called the Cape May Handbook. I referenced that throughout this project and brought a lot of material from that to the current book. The standards were updated in 1990. Cape May published the first historic design standards back in 2002. Since then, in the last 20 years, the Secretary of the Interior has updated their standards for rehabilitation, also provided some guidance on flood mitigation and sustainability. So all of these documents were incorporated into the current design standards here in 2023. So there's 4 sections to the design standards, which are available on the website, and I think everyone from the zoning board should be getting hard copies shortly. Introduction, the standards themselves, architectural styles, and appendix. Much of the text, the standards, are really still intact from the previous version. We've only made really cosmetic updates to bring them to current standards and in compliance with the 2017 Secretary of the Interior standards. So starting at the top of the building, there's a roof section, exterior cladding, windows, porch and entrance where a lighting for residential properties section was added. Doors, we've added guidance on garage doors. There's a site and streetscape section, so that's really important to Cape May, and we've expanded that portion to include guidance for walls, yards. There's a storefront section, so there's guidance in there related to commercial lighting and signage. We've added an accessibility portion for ramps and different alterations to bring properties into compliance with ADA. There's now also a mechanical and utility equipment section, so that covers some of the ordinances that have been added in the last 10 or 15 years related to solar power, solar panels, for example. There's a flood mitigation section, big topic in Cape May, and how to raise a building in the historic district without completely obliterating the streetscape. And there's some helpful diagrams within that section, and also references to a lot of the great resources that the state has published on that topic. The additions section, which is near the end of the standards, has been greatly expanded to provide a lot of guidance as to how one could sensitively and appropriately add an addition at different portions of the house. It's important to note, of course, as I'm sure you all know, not all historic properties in Cape May, especially some of the smaller lot sizes, can accommodate additions in an appropriate manner that without destroying its historic integrity. And that's noted throughout. The new construction section has been expanded, as well as we've added a relocation and demolition portion. So just to give you a brief flavor as to what the design standards look like now, this was the previous introduction. As you know, the design standards were black and white, a little bit difficult to follow formatting-wise. There's a lot of text and density of content. We've kind of pulled them apart, modernized the layout. It's all hyperlinked. It's a lot easier to follow now. There's references to both your local ordinances as they're applicable in the different sections, as well as different state and federal resources available to learn more about different things. This was previously what the roof section looked like. And now you see there's a lot more context up front in each of the different systems and features sections for roofs, windows, and exterior cladding. And then the last page of each section with a gray box in blue will be the standards for contributing properties in the district. And then below that, there's a gray box for the standards for non-contributing buildings, which are, of course, much more lenient. This was the new construction, or I'm sorry, this was the additions portion. It was really just 3 or 4 paragraphs in the previous standards, which has now since been expanded to include these 4 pages and specific standards for different types of additions, because how you add an addition at the side or the rear yard is going to be pretty different than the standards one would need to follow for like a garage or a carriage house to do that in an appropriate manner. The new construction section before was pretty lengthy. It included some guidance for East Cape May. We've kind of combined that all into one big new construction section that addresses appropriate site placement, acknowledgement of development patterns, height, massing, proportion, and scale, architectural features, and last but not least, materials. All those different components come right out of the federal standards and different guidance documents that the Secretary of the Interior has developed for new construction or additions to historic districts. And we've taken that and kind of customized it to Cape May's unique built environment. Then the third section of the book is architectural styles. And we're still using the HABS drawings for that, which are on the left, a couple different examples of each style, and on the right, different character-defining features. And the intent of this is to make sure that when someone comes with a Queen Anne property, say, to the Historic Preservation Commission, to make sure they're not altering any of these character-defining features to the point where they're no longer recognizable. There's also in the bottom right of all the different architectural styles pages, a list of recommended, but definitely not required, appropriate colors for the body trim, shutter doors, and different features of the property for homeowners just to take into consideration. The HPC will not still be reviewing colors. And lastly, just to give you, the zoning board and anyone else in attendance tonight, an overview of the schedule for the outreach portion. If anyone wants to learn more about the design standards, there'll be 3 public events in September. 2 of them will be at Convention Hall for realtors and homeowners on September 14th. Those will also be broadcast on Zoom and recorded to watch afterwards as well. And then there'll be an event which is actually going to be offered to the entire state of New Jersey for architects on September 28th. General information will be provided at all those, and really, I think any of them would be helpful for anyone to attend that's interested. You'll also see shortly in City Hall, there'll be brochures available and examples on the right there for homeowners for just kind of general synopsis information on the new design standards and where they can go for additional information. There'll also be one for business owners, for storefronts, contractors, available in City Hall. And just lastly, this entire project was sponsored by a grant from the New Jersey Historic Preservation Office. And we thank them, for their support of this project and all the different surveys and work that they've done in Cape May to enrich your built historical environment. So thank you all very much. I hope you take the new design standards into consideration. If you see any appeals or matters that go before Zoning and Historic Preservation Commission, I think you'll find them much easier to understand. They should streamline the process and allow the HPC to reach decisions on a logical and rational ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Our first application tonight is Christine Carlson Glazer, 710 Columbia Avenue. Turn on the mics.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Catanese of the Monzo Catanese Delalas Law Firm. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Christine Carlson Glazer. In this application, we're seeking variance relief for property located at 710 Columbia Avenue. With me is Ms. Carlson Glazer. She's the property owner, along with our project architect, Christina Amy. This property is currently the site of a 6-unit tourist guest house. There are many non-conforming conditions on the site. You'll hear from Ms. Amy on that in just a minute. Ms. Carlson Glazer proposes to renovate the building, converting it to a single-family home, and that use, that is, single-family homes, are permitted in the residential seasonal zoning district, which is the zone, of course, where this is located. In addition, the renovation will improve a number of nonconformities on the outset, on the site. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. There is what we've identified as an expansion of the building, and technically there is one, but I want to be clear at the outset that the expansion that's proposed for this building is a vertical one on the existing footprint at the rear of the building. The expansion of the building is not to increase living space. It is to increase ceiling height and bring the house level, the rear of the house level with the front of the house. There will be no increase in the habitable living space, and there will be no increase in the floor area ratio for the property. So the scope of that expansion is minor, and again, Ms. Amy will get to that. Nonetheless, we do require a few variances. First, lot size, lot width, and lot frontage. For a single-family home, this zone requires 50 feet of lot frontage and 6,250 square feet of lot area, but it's a 40-foot wide lot, so it's undersized at 4,000 square feet. Those are all existing conditions we believe are clear hardships and will be a significant improvement over the shortfall that exists now for the tourist guest house. There is a proposed rear yard setback variance. Again, this is only to that increased ceiling height, no new footprint, no new living area. There's a small side yard setback variance proposed. It's about 1 foot of vertical addition that resulted from, again, raising those heights, the ceiling heights. And the lot coverage, which while being reduced from 67% down to 54%, will still be over the 45%. That's the limit for a single-family home. There will also be stormwater management system as shown on the plans. So overall, we believe the single-family home is a more appropriate use for this substantially undersized lot than the current 6-unit use. The changes will result in closer conformity to the regulations, and on top of all that, the house is going to be upgraded and beautified as part of the process. The HPC has granted conceptual approval for this project. Final would abide by the later hearing if this board sees fit to approve it tonight. And with that, if we can have Ms. Carlson Glazer and Ms. Amy sworn. We don't propose any direct testimony from Ms. Carlson Glazer, though we may have questions at some point. We can swear them both now.
Okay, if you would both please raise your right hand. We're also going to swear in our board engineer at this time. Do all of you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. I know Ms. Amy has been before this board in the past. We offer her as an expert in architecture and planning.
That's acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Amy, if you could start with a review of the existing conditions. We have boards behind us. They are precisely what has been submitted with the application, correct?
That is correct, yes.
The existing house or building structure is a historic structure that was a tourist guest house. It wasn't maintained very well for a portion of time. It's in generally rough condition. There's a unsightly metal fire escape on the left side. There is pretty much the property is covered with gravel. The owner has obtained a demolition permit, not for the structure, just to start interior demolition, and that has started in terms of removing some of the plaster, the existing plumbing, that sort of thing. No exterior work has started yet. It's existed there for many years, from the 1800s, and then the back of the house, which you can see from the drawings, there have been additions, several over, where there was maybe a porch enclosed, then a second floor put on, and then expanded again as a porch, that enclosed, and kind of subsequently multiple times. With that, when they added on the additions of the second floors, were just on top of the sloped porch roof. So some of the floors, as you can see from the existing plans, you'll see steps internally from the front of the house towards the back of the house as these additions were enclosed. In that condition, in terms of potentially renovating this to a single-family residence, that is a little bit not ideal. And with that, the structure of those ceilings and roofs is quite questionable. There's 2x4s going like 20 feet, which I didn't realize as I was walking on the roof until later when the plaster was removed. So I'm glad to still be here. So that's the condition of the existing house.
Would you like to go over the variance plan?
Sure. So as I said, one of the things we're trying to do is make that second and third floor, or the second floor really, one level. So in doing so, the headroom starts to run out. Again, the ceilings come down really low over those roofs. So go to the second page where the elevations are. You can see it more clearly where the ceiling heights start to drop down as these additions and went through. What we're looking to do is actually level off the second floor and create just a standard 8-foot ceiling in those rooms. We're not looking for anything exceptionally high, just again, a standard 8-foot ceiling. To do that, the existing portion of the rear of the house extends past the rear setback line. So we do need, because we are extending that vertically, we do need a variance for that. And then in addition, again, this little portion here also expands into the side yard setback. That has to go up about a foot to get those ceilings high enough for the floors to be level. In addition to that, we're removing a rear stair. So we are decreasing kind of the existing building's encroachment towards the rear of the house, as well as some of these little storage sheds. That metal exterior fire stair is no longer needed, so that will go away. And then there's also a little kind of stair off to a sideboard here that will be removed as well. Again, the property is almost completely covered in stone. We would be creating more green space with that. So landscaping will replace much of that existing stone. There is a significant reduction in that impervious coverage, but to achieve the required parking, walkways, that sort of thing, we are still asking for a variance for that lot coverage. The off-street parking currently would require 7 parking spaces as a tourist guest house. However, as a single family, it only requires 3. The existing tourist guest house layout didn't accommodate those 7 parking spaces. And realistically, they were all stacked in addition to not accommodating 7. We are proposing 3 stacked parking spaces, all beyond the front line of the house. And that would meet the number of parking spaces for the number of bedrooms we have. Again, we're not proposing any increase in the floor area ratio, not increasing the total building height, just this rear portion here. We are proposing an expansion of this deck, but that is completely compliant with setbacks and height. That is not expanding beyond what zoning permits.
So the vertical expansion in the rear, in fact, it's on the back of the house where the house is even narrower than what we see from the street, correct?
That is correct. The width of the house in that portion is about 13.25 feet wide, and we are proposing it for, it's 13.9 to the house versus 25 is required, so just shy of 9 feet. And that is, oops. I also have a exhibit, which would.
I'll hand that out if you like, yeah.
I have proposed on the elevation, on the side elevation, an outline of the,
Yeah, we'll mark this as Exhibit A1. It is a side view showing existing versus proposed, I'll call it building outline. Right, Cindy? You need one for you, right?
So what you're looking at is the proposed side elevation, and then the red, orangey red line is actually the profile of that existing side elevation imposed on top of that proposed, the existing proposed on top of the proposed. And then there's kind of a green line, might be able to see more like an outline of where we are expanding beyond that portion. So we are actually lowering the deck rail, although that deck is compliant. We're lowering the deck rail, but the portion of roof that goes beyond that is raising a foot, and in the back, we're raising it about 3 feet 4 inches.
Okay, so really, the only expansion would be this area right here,
Correct.
between the red and the green?
Yeah, and up to that orange line that says rear setback.
Got it,
Correct.
got it. So there's the extent of the variance relief right there.
And then again, there's just a sliver right here. But
Is that, did I make that
She
clear?
was in my way.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's right here, right?
Did we give that a, what did we mark that?
Is that correctly
That
marked?
is correctly marked.
We'll mark this as A2, as a markup, it's just where you see that X.
Is that chimney staying or?
The chimney is being removed.
A1 is unmarked up and A2 is marked up, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Okay.
You're looking for.
So as a summary of the variances, again, the lot width and the lot area, lot width and frontage for the current guest house use is 80 feet in width and frontage and 15,000 in lot area, where the existing lot is 40 feet wide, 4,000 square feet. Single family does require a 50-foot frontage and 6,250 square feet of lot area, so we are not in compliance with that still. It's an existing non-conforming lot, we can't expand, but we are less deviant from what the zoning would require as a single family.
Ms. Amy, is it a fair statement that currently this lot isn't just a little bit undersized for the 6-unit use? It's really substantially undersized for 6
Substantially
units.
undersized. I mean, it's less than half the width required and, less than a third of the area. The rear yard setback for either use is 25 feet, so that is a existing nonconformity that we're not proposing to change as the existing building approaches, but we are, again, proposing that small area of vertical expansion on the existing footprint. Only 3 feet 4 inches higher in that portion. And we are reducing where the stair, where that rear stair is being removed, although there is an exterior which would stay kind of in that area. The lot coverage, again, the current lot is 67% coverage. 45 is what's permitted for a single family, proposed is 54. Again, overall, the green space has increased, although technically we're creating a new variant by switching uses.
And in addition to that, we've submitted with this application engineered stormwater management plans that will meet with, obviously, the board engineer's approval.
Correct. And then again, the side yard setback, we do have that 1-foot vertical expansion where this portion over this hallway to make that ceiling continuous, it has a vertical expansion. Those are the variances.
Now, we've proposed these variances under both the hardship and the broad or flexible C standard. The hardship standard asks or states that where the strict application of the zoning ordinance would result in exceptional or practical difficulties or exceptional and undue hardship upon the applicant, which is caused by either the exceptional shape of the property, such as its shallowness or narrowness, or any other extraordinary feature that affects the property or the lawfully existing structures, then relief is appropriate. In your opinion, does a hardship exist here?
Yes, because it is an existing condition of this extremely small property with this existing building, which does encroach. And it being historic, there's less flexibility in what can be done.
The proposal really is to conform this property not only to the permitted single-family use, but really to bring this back to a home, which is how it was originally constructed in the 1800s, more akin to its original form, correct?
Correct.
And the fact that this lot, like you said, has those existing nonconformities as to the rear yard setback and to a small degree that side yard setback for the proposed addition, that's a hardship caused by the structure, the location of the structure on the lot, correct?
Correct.
We've also applied under the broad C standard, which asks whether the application advances any purposes of zoning and whether the benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. Are there any purposes of zoning that are advanced by this application, in your opinion?
Yes, from a building safety standpoint, the building had older systems in place for fire, electrical, plumbing probably needed to be replaced just from a deterioration standpoint. Those things would be alleviated both internally within the structure with the level of the floors as well as drywall, appropriate smoke detectors, that sort of thing. In addition to that, we're creating the appropriate off-street parking, which helps the community, and we're increasing the visual environment with creating more green space, as well as helping with the stormwater runoff.
To the extent we're going from a 6-unit building down to a single-family home, is that more consistent with the intended population density in the zone?
It is, it's less intense density.
And obviously, this is a historic structure. I think you indicated it was built in the late, I know in our application, we submitted that it was built in the late 1800s, is that correct?
Correct.
So does the renovation of this in conformance with the HPC design standards promote the conservation of historic sites?
Yes.
Are these benefits accompanied by any detriment, in your opinion?
No, especially since we're not expanding the footprint of the building at all.
And fair enough, then, that these would substantially outweigh any detriment that could be attributed to the expansion?
Yes.
And that's the negative criteria. Can the relief be granted without substantially impairing the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance or the zone plan?
Yes.
Is that, I think it.
I always
sort
have
of-
to, that one always throws me off in the positive and negative.
Got it. Well, the question is this, will there be substantial detriment
No,
to
there
the
would not be
plan
substantial detriment.
as a
to
result of the expansion?
Correct. There would not be substantial detriment.
And it seems obvious, but is that because of the minor nature of the expansion of the building?
Correct. Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so.
Does anybody have any questions?
Well, that's where we're going next. That's really our presentation, subject to any questions that you have.
I just have a quick question. On the plans here, I see proposed outdoor shower. Is that proposed because with the setback, do we have to give a variance for that for the setbacks?
No.
Okay.
I'll answer. Attached outdoor structures, outdoor showers attached to the principal structure have a lessened setback, and that is conforming with the requirements. I believe it's 5 feet and 4 feet in the different directions to rear and side yard setback. So they're not required to meet that 25-foot rear yard setback.
Thanks.
I have a question. Are you relocating AC units? I see there's a green line on the second floor for AC units. Where were they? It says proposed.
Where?
Where was it originally?
Originally, they were here, so they were entirely in the rear yard over here.
Okay.
On the back of the roof, correct? Back of the
Correct.
house on the roof?
Correct. Where the chimney is shown on that diagram, the chimney was not the specific center, but the chimney was surrounded by them.
Oh, okay.
So I think she's asking where they're going to be. I'm not
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I thought you saw where they were. You were asking where they were.
On A1.
So they are going to be on this side here.
Ms. Amy, so they'll be on the second, they'll be on the roof?
They'll be on the roof, right?
Will they be shielded from the public view behind the wider main house?
They will be from the street, yes.
Also, I see there's approval from the fire department, but are you going to hardwire the fire smoke detectors? Since I know before 1958, you don't have to have hardwire, but since you're doing renovations, it has to be hardwired?
Yes, they will be.
Okay.
Anyone else?
The deck that's up there now, is that used as a deck now, or is that just access for a fire escape?
No, it is a deck, it is large enough to be a deck now, yes.
I don't even know.
Okay, if we have no more questions, we'll have Craig's report.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to summarize my June 20th, 2023 review memo. This is an application located at 710 Columbia Avenue, which is in the RS Residential Seasonal District. The use that's proposed is a single-family dwelling. That is a proposed use in the district, as well as what the former use was, as the Forest Guest House was also a permitted use. I did perform a completeness review on this application. There were waivers requested from items 2, 4, 26, and 27. We did support the granting of those waivers. Item number 33, they did provide a landscaping plan. They just omitted the sizes of the species, so we would ask that that be provided as a condition of approval. And based on those recommendations, we did recommend that the board deem the application complete and hear the application. I'll move into the review of the zoning requirements and the variances that have been requested. And I would just like to preempt that discussion with, whenever we have these conversions in Cape May, our bulk and area requirements are based on the permitted use. So when we change uses, we change the bulk and area requirements. Most often, the lot size changes, the lot width requirements change, lot frontage requirements change, and lot coverage is the big one that usually changes. So in this case, for instance, the lot coverage requirement for a tourist guest house was 70%, and then if you're going to change it to a single-family dwelling, it drops down to 45%. So it's a significant change, and it usually triggers a variance. So when we have these conversions, a lot of them end up at this board. So I just want to explain to you, like, that's kind of the nuance of when we have these conversions. So in this case, the uses are permitted. The lot size of requirement in the district is 6,250 square feet for single-family dwellings, 4,000 existing, 4,000 is proposed. You have development all around the existing lot, so there's no room to comply. Same thing with the lot width. Lot width is existing, non-conforming. The lot width requirements are 50 feet. The lot is narrow at 40 feet, and that's duplicated for lot frontage. The rear yard setback, this is consistent for all the uses in the zone. 25 feet is the requirement. 13.9 feet exists, and they're proposing a vertical expansion, and that vertical expansion encroaches no closer to that line, but it's vertically, and it still remains at 13.9 feet. So there's a variance necessary for that. Side yard setback, very similar. It's 8 foot on each side. On the side that requires a variance, which is the right side, if you're looking from the street, 5.7 feet exists, 5.7 feet is proposed. That's a vertical expansion. It's encroaching no closer to that side lot line. And finally, lot coverage. Lot coverage is dropped down to 45% based on the proposed use. 67.7% is existing. They've eliminated a lot of the gravel areas and impervious areas and dropped that number down to 54.4%, but it does not conform with the new use, and therefore there's a variance required. I do have one typo in that zoning table on page 3 of 6. This is a 6-bedroom, single-family dwelling. That requires 3 parking spaces, not 2 parking spaces. They have provided 3. It still conforms, but that number just needs to be edited. So that's a summary of the variances that are required. I'll move on to the general review comments. These all should be conditions of approval should the board grant favorable approval. One is our standard condition that they have to conform with Chapter 258, which is the Flood Damage Protection Code for new construction. And we would ask that the flood zone information, including which zone the project is located, has to be added to the plan. 2, we've asked that the zoning table should be revised to reflect comments in this review memo. 3, they've taken advantage of our credit for 50% lot coverage when you're proposing permeable paving surfaces. So we would have to see the construction details to make sure that those materials comply, and therefore that information has to be added to the plan. 4, they have provided a grading and drainage plan. We did find that it was satisfactory. We asked them to provide some additional information and tweak that system a little bit, and I'm hoping that the applicant is able to do that. And so they're nodding their heads yes.
Yes,
So
sorry.
they will comply with that. So therefore, we do support that grading and drainage plan based on our recommendations. 5 is our standard condition that they have to comply with the ordinance number 485-2022, which is the minimum stormwater management and grading requirements. 6 is our requirement that they provide 1 street tree, so the landscaping plan has to be modified to reflect that. 7 is our standard condition that sidewalk adjacent to the subject site will be replaced to the satisfaction of the engineer, and that is done prior to CO approval in case there's any damage during construction. We clean that up at the end. 8 is the standard condition that they have to provide the required inspection escrow, and the certificate of occupancy or acceptance of improvements is tied to a satisfactory inspection. 9 is compliance with the requirements of the Cape May Shade Tree Commission, Fire Department, and Public Works Department. We did receive all of those memos, and Fire Department memo dated 7/19/23, Public Works 7/14/23, and the Shade Tree Commission 7/12/23, and they are recommendations for approval, and they had no comments with regards to those. Okay, 10 is the condition that approval should be conditioned on compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. 11, they have to get final HPC approval. 12 is compliance with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements at the time of approval, issuance of building permits, or certificate of occupancy is applicable. And finally, should the board grant approval, the applicant is required to revise the plan sets to meet any conditions that the board sets, and submit those sets for review and approval to the board engineer. That's a summary of my review. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Craig, I just have a question about lot coverage. I know we usually say with stone, they can't have stone, they have to have grass. Is that what you've taken into consideration with this lot coverage?
So they've eliminated, there's an existing stone parking surface towards the left side of the lot. They've removed a lot of that. They provided pavers and landscaping on that side, so they've mitigated a lot of that. Was that what you were asking?
Well, that, and I guess pavers are still at 50%, right? So it's still,
Right, the stone and pavers both were 50%.
Okay.
They've eliminated a lot of the surface.
okay, because I see on the right side, there's a paver walkway.
On
So-
the right side, yes.
Okay. So that's still part of that, they're
That
still getting.
counts towards the lot coverage.
Okay, thank you.
We're at 50%.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no more questions from the board, we're opening it up to anyone within 200 feet of the property. Anyone beyond 200 feet? Okay, we're closing to the public.
If there's no discussion, the motion that I recommend being made, I'm making an affirmative, but how you vote is up to you. And the motion I recommend being made is a motion to grant the variance as described in the engineer's report on page 3, and the variance is listed on 1 through 5 on page 3 of the engineer's report, subject to the 4 waivers identified by the board engineer, as well as conditions 1 through 13 on the page 5 of the engineer's report. That's the motion I recommend being made, but how you vote is, and the C1 standard and the C2 standard is as described in the engineer's report. If you have any questions, I'll repeat it.
Can we have that motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Ms. Sheehan motions. Mr. Ledwin seconds. Mr. Ledwin?
Aye.
Thank you. Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I didn't get to say anything tonight, but thank you all very much for, and Craig for your review. I know you spent a lot of time on this. Thank you.
Good luck with your project.
Yes.
Thank you.
Like,
Okay, our next application is Fern and Kevin Waters, 1218 New York Avenue. And if you would turn on your mics. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Keith Davis. I'm an attorney at Nemad Davis & Goldstein. I'm here on behalf of Fern and Kevin Waters. Fern Waters is here to my right this evening concerning this property located at 1218 New York Avenue, designated on your tax map as Block 1131, lots 11 and 12. The proposal tonight is very simple. It is to establish a deck on the rear of the property in question to provide outdoor living space for the Waters in connection with this existing home. There are existing nonconformities, notably it's an undersized lot of record, so we're nonconforming as to lot size, lot width, and lot frontage. We're requesting tonight, in terms of new variances, a variance for maximum deck width. We're proposing 26.5 feet, where 24.75 feet is the proposal. And as you'll hear through the testimony of our architect and our planner, that's principally being done so that the deck matches up to the exterior width of the existing home in the rear yard. In addition, we're requesting a C variance for lot coverage. That is being increased from 48.3% currently to 52% as proposed. The requirement is 40%. The deck is approximately 289 square feet in size. There's stairs that are proposed. There's an outdoor shower that is also proposed as part of the plan of development. That's the application that's before you this evening. There are internal renovations that the Waters are conducting within the home that are not part of this application that we're presenting to you, but I do want to acknowledge that that is taking place. Your zoning officer, Mr. Britton, has raised a question as to the lawfulness of existing space on the third floor and whether that requires an FAR variance. I'm not sure if the board has received a copy of his correspondence or not. We're working with Mr. Britton on that. Our architect, Mr. Schultz, has written to him recently. We did a fairly expansive Open Public Records Act request, obtain building permits. We're hopeful we can satisfy Mr. Britton that that space on the third floor is lawfully pre-existing. But if we're not successful in doing so, that will be a subsequent application for an FAR variance if needed. Again, I'm just giving you background on that. Talked to Mr. Hurlis about it. He asked me to address it. But that's not what's before you this evening. The only thing we're asking for the board this evening are the variances that relate to the outdoor deck that's proposed in the rear yard of the home. I have 3 witnesses with me tonight. In addition to Mrs. Waters, I have our architect, David Schultz, and our planner and engineer, Andrew Schaefer. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to have all 3 of those witnesses sworn in.
Yes.
Our board engineer remains under oath. To each of you, raise your right hands if you would. Each of you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Waters, I'd like to start with you and just give a little background and history as to your ownership of the home in question. When did you and your husband purchase this home?
The end of 2004, beginning of 2005. I think we closed January 2005.
And before that time, you and your family had been coming to Cape May?
Since my oldest was 6 weeks old, so 26 years this past June.
Okay. Before we get into the improvement, that is the deck variance, I know we've had a chance to review Mr. Hurlis's memorandum, which references existing nonconformities as to parking. You have a rather unique circumstance, whereas you share a driveway with your neighbor pursuant to an easement, correct?
That is correct.
Can you describe how it's configured and how it's utilized by you and your neighbor?
So as a bit of background, the 3 houses in question or in the area were built by the same family, and 2 daughters lived in the house, one of the houses that I live in. The father gave only 1 driveway for the 2 daughters to share. And now I occupy the house in the middle. I share the driveway with my neighbor, Lois Boylan, and her late husband, Tom Boylan. It's been almost an ideal situation because sharing that driveway has brought the 2 families closer together. We obviously have to cooperate. Now we're almost like family, the 2 families. It provides necessary parking when we don't have space to park on the street. It's a great area for all the children to play. First my kids, now her grandkids. And it's, pretty high. I've shared driveways before. This one functions really well.
And that's been in a condition that has existed since you and your husband have owned the home?
Well before we owned the home.
Okay, and since then? And you're not proposing any alterations to that driveway configuration in connection with the deck addition, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let's talk about the deck addition itself. Can you just explain to the board, why are you undertaking this improvement?
Well, we would,
Mr. Davis, before you leave that one, can I ask this question? It may be answered in the
Sure.
packet somewhere, but is this an easement that's a recorded,
It is.
valid easement? You're comfortable with that?
We are, and we've submitted a recorded copy of it. It's part of our application package.
Thank you, sir.
You go ahead, you talk about
Okay.
the deck improvement.
so we've owned this house for almost 20 years. We'd like to be able to continue living in it comfortably for the next 20 years. Time marches on, and, we face more challenges as we age. We'd like to be able to bring the outdoor living space from the backyard up so that we can have a grill adjacent to the kitchen, don't have to walk up and down the steps carrying burgers and fries and hamburgers, and we don't have to go down the stairs to enjoy our, hopefully someday, grandchildren playing in the backyard in the outdoor area. We've watched our neighbors, again, the Boylans who have a deck, thoroughly enjoy their time on the deck, watching the kids in the driveway playing and running around in the backyard, and we'd like to have the same added space. Plus, it's a beautiful breeze.
The Boylans are the neighbors who share the driveway with you.
Yes, sorry.
And I know one of your neighbors is here tonight who may speak during the public portion, but have you had a chance to talk to your other neighbors about this proposed improvement?
I've spoken to almost all my neighbors, yes.
That's all I have for Mrs. Waters. Any questions for her about the use of the home or the deck addition? All right, if not, I'm going to call forward Mr. Schultz, who I think has been accepted as an expert in the field of architecture before this board before. Any questions about his credentials?
No.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Schultz, you've been engaged by the Waters, and you prepared the architectural plans that we submitted as part of this application, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Can you describe the existing conditions of the home?
Yes, I'd like to use some exhibits to do that.
Yes. Exhibits.
If it's okay with the board, I brought 4 boards that are in addition to your zoning package. These were boards that were developed for the Historic Preservation Commission approval, and they're just easier to see from a distance. Can you turn the microphone, please? Of course. Sorry. They're just easier to see from a distance, so I'd like to use these to explain the project.
Yeah, we'll identify them as we go through, Karen, for the record. Be happy
Yeah,
to do so.
and
Why
we're-
don't we mark this first one as Exhibit A1? Can you identify that for the record?
Those are photos of the existing property.
And it's marked as your plan sheet HPC 001?
Correct.
Now, this isn't part of our application set to the zoning board, but you did submit this to the HPC.
That's correct.
Okay. We can go through each one, and then we can mark them as we go.
Oh,
Can you
oh.
describe what A1 shows?
Yeah, these are photos of the house taken this summer. I think I'm sorry.
No problem.
The upper left is a photo of the house from the street. The house was built in the Craftsman style in 1914 to 1915. There are 3 identical houses, and as was just mentioned, we're the house in the middle. They're all in the Craftsman style, and this house in particular is beautifully maintained. All the details and all the materials have been updated over the years in the original style and the material, and it's a light green color if you've happened to have driven by it. Beautiful porch on the front side. So this is looking at the house from the street, and then the lower picture is looking at the house from the western side or the right side, just to give you some points of reference. We're not proposing any changes to the house. The only thing we're proposing is the rear deck addition.
All right, we'll mark this as A2, and this is sheet HPC 010,
Correct.
which we submitted to the commission, correct?
Correct.
All right, what does this show?
Well, this shows basically a plan, and it's very much what you have in your package. It's just easier to see. So in the dark blue color is the body of the house. That's the house as it exists. And in the rear, or this in kind of bottom left, is the garage profile, which was described as shared equally. And the driveway in light tan is shared, and you can see the property line goes down the middle of it. And that's similar to what's in your package. The light blue is the big porch, the wraparound porch on the front of the house, which is great. Everything in green is either grass or landscaping as proposed. So the light brown is the profile of the proposed deck. I'm sorry, mind your way. You can see that it's 10'3" deep by 26'6" wide, again, as proposed. Up in the corner next to the house is a new outdoor shower, which is replacing the outdoor shower that was on the rear of the house. There's also a stair that takes you from the deck level down to grade, which is proposed there. There's pervious pavers as a landing pad here off the stair, and there'll be pervious pavers in the outdoor shower. There's still lots of yard space. It's 42 feet from the back of the deck to the rear yard property line, so it's still nice and open.
Okay. Mark this as A3. What is this show? This is sheet HPC-601.
Correct. These show elevations, and the next couple of boards are really elevation sheets showing the house. The upper left is the existing front facade, which again is not changing. It just shows what's there today. This drawing shows what's there today as well without the deck. So these are existing conditions. You can see there's an outdoor shower structure, which will be removed as part of the project. The one that's in color or rendered, it shows the deck. So the deck is right here, It's going to be constructed with brick pillars to match the existing foundation. There will be lattice, open lattice construction, so it meets the flood code and water could go through that. The floor of the deck will be a wood deck, and it would be matching the level of the first floor of the house. The first floor of the house is at 13.25 feet above sea level, so it's above what's required by the City of Cape May's flood ordinance. The railings will be in keeping with the style of the house, painted white wood, nice cap, all in the right detailing to really complement the house. And of course, this was all approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. I think we're going to run out of room. Yes, thank you.
Mark, this is A4, which is sheet HPC 600, correct?
Correct.
What does this show?
This shows the elevation of the house from the left side or the east side of the property. You can see the body of the house. You can see it's a gambrel style house. At the far back is where our deck is. So again, it's a raised deck on brick piers, lattice, so it can so floodwaters could pass through. And these are the steps from the deck level down to grade, and you'll see a side view of the railings.
Okay.
That's it.
And A5, which is sheet HPC 602.
Correct. And this would be our last exhibit. Well, this shows the other side of the house, the right side of the house, the eastern side of the house. I'm sorry, the western side of the house. You can see the large porch on the street side of the property. And at the rear, there is the outdoor shower, which is taking place to the steps that exist today, because they won't be needed once the deck is there. And there's the side view of the deck, as you can see, same materials, same profile.
I'd like to go back to what we marked as A3, sheet HPC 601. The width of the deck, we require variance for that, correct?
Yes, we do.
Is there a reason why we're requesting that? Does it relate to the size and width of the existing home?
It does. Frankly, it just matches the width of the back of the house, which is where the kitchen is. For simplicity, we'd like to match that. And it's non-conforming because the lot width is non-conforming.
Okay.
It also allows us ample space for the stair to come down to grade.
One of the purposes of zoning is to provide a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement based upon the elevations you just provided testimony to. And as an architect, do you believe that purpose is advanced here?
I do.
Sure. Would you like me to repeat that question? All right, I'll truncate it. There's a desirable visual environment, purpose of the municipal land use law. Are you familiar with that?
I do agree with that. I think that the deck addition will be complementary to the home, and it's going to have the same kinds of details and materials that the home currently has.
That's all I have for Mr. Schultz. Any questions as to architecture?
What will be under the deck?
It's going to be an open space. There is, I forgot to mention, there's an access, few stairs down to the basement, which exists.
So this will be, the stairs will be past the deck?
The stairs, the stairs start there. I can show you on a bigger plan if you'd like.
Let's do that, just so all the other board members can see what you're referring to.
Under it meaning, is it going to be earth? Is it going to be pavers? Is it going to be concrete slab?
This one here?
No, A2 is one on the floor.
I think the question is just what's under the deck.
I don't know where it is.
I think it's best shown here.
Okay, let's identify this for the record. This is sheet Z200. I think we're up to exhibit A6.
This is part of the zoning package that you all have. So these are floor plans, which I think show it in a little better detail than the site plan does. If you can see this, the lower level plan, there's currently what we'll call an areaway that drops down a few feet so you can get under and into the basement door.
Oh, there's access there?
There's a full basement. There's already a door there. We're going to keep that. So we just need to bring the areaway out a little further to get under the deck, and then you'll be able to walk under the deck into the basement. The area under the deck is storage. It's probably going to be gravel, I'm assuming. It's not intended to be improved.
Is the deck surface for the proposed deck pervious?
Yes. It's a wood deck, so there'd be spaces between the deck boards, yes.
Okay. I'll have a follow-up question. One of the things I identified in my review memo, because it seems like there's an existing paver patio that's there now, and I'm assuming that's being counted as 50% pervious. No?
I don't think we're counting that as part of our coverage, and the reason
Well,
is,
that's existing, and it looks like it's being removed.
it's existing, but it is not lawfully existing. There were no permits, unbeknownst to Mrs. Waters, who
Okay.
hired a contractor, trusted the contractor to put that patio in years ago, but apparently it was not permitted. So
Okay,
when
now it's starting to make sense.
when we set forth the coverage calculation, we are not including that patio because it's not lawfully existing.
Gotcha. Because it looks like you're removing that, and then the proposed deck is smaller than that, and I'm so like, how is there an increase in lot coverage?
That's why.
Okay, all right.
That's why. It's actually a reduction from the existing patio, but because the patio is not
Gotcha.
lawfully existing, we are not
I
including it.
understand, that was the missing element, I couldn't figure that out.
Craig, I have a follow-up question. Now, with the gravel underneath the deck, does that change it? Because they're also bringing out the steps further, so that's going to be concrete coming out further underneath the deck.
The deck itself does not have a roof on it, and it's pervious. It's going to count, the deck itself is going to count as 50%. Doesn't matter what's on it. If they put concrete underneath it, then it would be impervious. But because it's pervious on top of pervious, it will count to the 50% credit.
Okay. Even if, I think they're putting concrete there to move out the steps. Right?
They're showing a proposed 4 by 4.5 permeable pad on the plan. So
Well,
I
I
think
know
everything is proposed as permeable underneath the deck.
Oh, okay, because he was just mentioning that the steps are going to come out further. And I'm assuming that would be concrete steps that would come out further.
Into the yard, wood.
There would.
Into the yard.
No, not in the yard, underneath the basement, to the basement.
To the basement door.
Yes, yeah, those.
Yeah, there is an existing areaway that's concrete, it's 2.5 feet wide, 3 feet wide. That's going to be our access to the basement, so that would stay.
Oh,
And we're extending that slightly for head clearance under the deck. It's a small, I think we're going to drop down 3 risers.
Does Mr. Schaefer's lot coverage calculations reflect that?
Shortly.
They don't now, but they will?
Correct.
I just want to make sure that you're asking for the right
Variance.
percentage.
We are. We will.
Okay.
Maybe I can introduce Mr. Schaefer, and he can review the coverage issue.
Well, now that you know what the question is, I think his testimony moving forward at least can cover that.
Okay. Can I call him forward?
Yes, please.
And can we stipulate to his qualifications as an engineer and planner in New Jersey? Any questions about his qualifications?
He's been here before?
You've been here before, right, Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, okay.
All right, so Mr. Schaefer, you've also been engaged by the Waters. You've worked with Mr. Schultz on the plans that we've submitted as part of this application,
That
correct?
is correct, yes.
All right. Let's jump into the pavers and the coverage issues. Can you describe to the board what the new pavers are that will be installed and how you calculated the lot coverage?
Certainly. So originally, for the application, we calculated the deck as being impervious. I read the ordinance incorrectly. We get a 50%, assuming the gravel is underneath.
Which it will be.
Which it will be, that's correct. So while it's 289 square feet, I will cover the percentages of coverage later, exactly what that is. These are wooden steps that extend out into the yard, and then you walk down into the steps into the basement, if I understand that correctly. Or they're concrete, so we're going to make a small adjustment for that. The shower has permeable pavers in the bottom with no roof. That's all right.
Can you get the mic, please? I'm sorry.
They're having a little bit of a sidebar.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We can certainly get it on the record if we need to.
I couldn't hear.
Made the steps out of pavers? Okay, that's fine. We do need to extend the stairs, so rather than having concrete, we'll have pavers? Okay, good. So the deck is completely, the numbers I'm going to present will be completely correct in a moment. The previous patio that was there was north of 500 square feet. And I'm not sure if they would qualify as pervious pavers or not. But again, as Mr. Davis explained, they were not put in legally, so we are not counting them as an existing condition to begin with. And by the way, I'm referring to A2, as far as, it's much easier to read than mine.
So with that said, what is our proposed lot coverage?
So our proposed lot coverage correctly accounting for 50%
Can we
coverage
just
of the...
back up, Keith? Can we just do a little, in the order of Craig's chart? Because as you may recall, I try to do things fairly consistent. What happens is I take Craig's report and I take his chart, and then that flows into the resolution, and then that's what you get if you win. So I want to make sure that Craig's three numbers are consistent with your understanding. What am I supposed to do? It's on.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Oh, okay. I'll start over. Okay, as many of you know, I try to be consistent throughout the process, and I use Craig's report as the basis for the resolution in the end. So I just want to go through Craig's numbers on his chart and make sure that you all understand them and agree with them. And if we have to change them, we'll change them, and then you can explain why we're changing them. And that way, if you are approved and I take the chart as changed, that you can build comfortably with that, okay? So rather than do a lot of words, I try to just do the chart. So if you can look on Craig's chart, he has a 48.3 and then a mysterious parenthesis 57. So if we can just cover what that means and then go to
So
the next one.
that was me not understanding the fact that that there was an illegal existing pavered patio out there. So I was unsure. My calculation did not mesh up with their calculation. Therefore, I flagged it and asked them for additional information. So I'm hoping Mr. Schaefer can now provide us with an existing number and a proposed number that
Right.
makes sense.
I
Okay.
do concur with your numbers in terms of existing coverage, the 57% included, as well as the proposed 52.
Let's explain that.
Certainly.
48.3% is the coverage on the site, excluding the patio.
Correct.
57% is including the patio.
Correct.
But it wouldn't be fair to say that that's existing because it's not lawful. We're not reducing coverage, we're actually increasing it over what's lawfully existing.
Correct.
All right, we're increasing it to,
Okay, so here comes the explanation. We have a patio, or excuse me, a deck of 289 square feet, 50% credit makes that 144.5 square feet. We have a shower of permeable pavers of 15 square feet with a 50% credit makes that 7.5. So that makes the actual proposed with the existing house, drive and everything, 3,060 square feet or 50.8%. So on the chart, that would take the 52% proposed to 50.8.
you're certain about that? Do
I'm
we wanna-
positive. I spent,
50.8.
correct.
Thank you.
So we incorrectly calculated the coverage of the deck, not giving it the 50% coverage credit.
So you are increasing the lot coverage from 48.3% to 50.8%.
Concur.
Thank you.
The deck will not be covered, correct?
The deck will not be covered, correct.
And as Mr. Schultz indicated, it will be open between the boards to allow for rainwater to pass through, correct?
That is correct, yes, with gravel underneath, which is also considered 50% permeable.
Okay. I know there's a grading plan requirement. Are we seeking a waiver from that submission, and why?
The reason is we're not changing any of the grading, so we're removing the patio, making that grass, and then adding the deck, which is elevated. So we are not proposing to change any of the existing grading. What might qualify as part of the grading plan was the stormwater management storage canisters we're proposing for the downspouts.
It-
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
So Mrs. Waters indicated that those downspouts are already there?
The downspouts are there, and there's dry wells under at least one of them, and the other one is directed to the street. It goes
Okay.
halfway up the driveway.
Yeah,
to
the plan as designed is proposing 4 of them to mitigate
Okay.
the increase in coverage.
Okay. In terms of the existing lot, it's deficient as to lot size, lot width, and lot frontage. Can't make any improvements to conform or more nearly conform with those standards,
That
correct?
is correct. And as the architect pointed out, the 3 houses in a row, which this is the center house, are basically identical houses. But it's also interesting that the lots are the same width. They're a little over 49 feet, a little less than 50 feet. It's a very, very similar situation, all 3 lots. And so that makes the lot width 80% of what's required. It makes the lot area 80% of what's required.
Mr. Schaefer, whether the patio had a permit or not, the property has existed at 57% for some time, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, did you see any indication of that causing any problems on the site in terms of drainage?
No, no issues appear to be there in terms of washout, erosion, or puddling on neighbors' lots.
Okay, so only lawyers and engineers would say that you're not decreasing the lot coverage, but in reality, you're decreasing the lot coverage.
That is correct, as to what's been there for some years, yes.
Okay.
You agree with that assessment, Mrs. Waters, that there's been no adverse conditions, flooding conditions with the existing patio?
I agree.
All right. The parking requirements, they're existing, no changes?
Correct, no changes.
The variance that we're requesting for deck width, you heard Mr. Schultz's testimony, that's related to the existing width of the existing home.
That's correct.
And you also heard his testimony that he believes it advances the desirable visual environment purpose as a planner. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do.
Do you believe there's any other purposes of zoning that are advanced through this application?
I do, in terms of floodwater or stormwater management. 2 things are happening. One, even though we are asking for a variance to increase, in real life, the impervious coverage is decreasing, as well as we're adding stormwater storage mitigation measures.
And is the light, air, and open space purpose advanced by retaining the deck as open space?
In my opinion, yes, there's more than adequate light, air, and open space provided, and it's consistent with the houses on either side.
So is it fair to say that the variances that we're requesting, it's a mix under the C1 and the C2 criterion?
I do agree. It's a mix of C1 and C2. C1 hardships being the lot width and lot area, and the C2 is there are no detriments being created.
Okay, so let's talk about, so that you believe the positive criteria has been satisfied under?
I do.
C1 and C2?
I do.
And then for the reasons you've testified to?
Correct.
As to the negative impacts, do you believe there's any substantial negative impact to the zone plan or to the public good if these variances are granted by the board?
No, there is no detriment to either.
And is that mitigated by the permeable pavers that you're installing and the other stormwater improvements?
It is a combination of stormwater storage as well as permeable materials being used for coverage.
Any negative impact in terms of view impacts to the neighboring property owners?
No, and as stated by the architect, the variance for the width of the patio is part of the aesthetic appeal being created by making it the same width of the house, especially when you consider the, and I don't want to be an architect here, but when you consider the brick pillars and so forth lining up with the rest of the house. But he stated that quite well, in that it is an aesthetic benefit to have it more so than it is not to have it.
And indeed, you heard Ms. Waters' testimony that her neighbor with whom she shares the driveway has a deck in the rear of her home right now.
Correct, yes.
So it'll be consistent with that
It'll be
development pattern?
consistent, yes.
For those reasons, do you believe the variances are justified and we've met our burden?
Yes, it's my professional opinion that the variances do not represent a detriment to the zoning ordinance or master plan, and the lot can accommodate the proposed improvement without substantially impacting neighbors, utilities, public good, zone plan, and zoning ordinance. So weighing the benefits versus the detriments, I believe there's no discernible negative impact.
You've had a chance to review Mr. Hurlis' memo dated June 2, 2023?
I have, yes.
And I know he's going to summarize his memo, but can we agree to all of the conditions he's raised?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's all I have for Mr. Schaefer.
I have a question on the neighbor's deck. You're saying that both of these houses are going to be kind of lined up. The deck is going to be exactly the same as the existing deck next door.
Yes, if you look at the aerial photograph, they line up fairly well. I mean, we didn't survey it, so I don't know to the exact dimensions that it does or doesn't line up.
We can't stipulate that it's the exact same size, but we believe it's going to be visually
Visually in
similar.
character, yes.
Craig, can you just say, partly for my benefit, I guess for this application, but also just for my edification, what is the zoning purpose of the ordinance that says it can only be 50% of the width of the rear of the home? Like, what's the genesis of that,
50% of the lot width.
of the lot width, yeah?
So, I was going to actually speak on that.
Good.
There actually is a recommendation contained in our last master plan reexamination that recommends removal of that, because it creates these decks that are squished in based on the lot width. The planning board's recommendation that control creates weird architecture, and that the remaining bulk and area requirements should really govern the development of decks at the rear properties. That has not been enacted by the governing body yet, but that has been recommended to the governing body. It just hasn't hit the books yet. So that variance is consistent with the recommendations contained in the master plan reexamination.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, that goes to the negative impacts, impairment to the zoning plan.
Okay. Any questions? We'll have Craig's review.
Okay, I'm summarizing my June 2nd, 2023 review memorandum for property located at 1218 New York Avenue. This is cited in the R2 low-medium density residential district. You've heard testimony from the applicants indicating what they're proposing to do, so I'll move right into the completeness review. They requested waivers from items number 19 and 28. We supported waivers from those checklist items and did recommend deeming the application complete. I'll highlight and review and summarize the zoning requirements in the R2 district. This is an existing non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. The lot does not conform with requirements of lot size, which is 7,500 square feet minimum in the district. 6,022 square foot exists and is proposed. Lot width requirements are 60 feet, 47.9 feet, 47.95 feet is the lot width. Lot frontage is 49.45. There is a weird jog on this property that creates the two different numbers. That's why those don't, normally they match up on rectangular lots. Okay, so those are the lot size requirements that don't conform. The improvements create two variances, one for lot coverage, and we just detailed that. 40% is the maximum permitted. Let me make sure, 48.3% is existing, 50.8% is proposed. The deck width is still a variance. That recommendation from the master plan has not hit the books yet. 50% of the 49.5 feet gives you a maximum deck width of 24.75 feet, where 26.5 feet is proposed. And whenever there are alterations or additions, the way your ordinance is worded, it says that they have to comply with the required parking spaces. In this case, it's a 6-bedroom, single-family dwelling. 3 spaces are required, 2 exist. Whenever we have these types of application, I always look to see if we can get another parking space in there. We cannot. That shared driveway, any proposed parking would impact the use of that other, the other side, the other adjoining lots' use of that shared parking driveway access easement. So therefore, it is what it is, but it's technically a variance. So those are summarized. The variances, the general review comments begin on page 4 of 5. These should all be conditions of approval. The standard condition that they have to comply with Chapter 258, the Flood Damage Protection Code. Item 2, we've asked for construction details for the surfaces that they're using the 50% credit for. Item number 3, that was me saying, I don't know how you're calculating this lot coverage, and now it all makes sense after the testimony, but I would modify item number 3 to say that they need to provide an existing and proposed lot coverage calculation on the plan as a condition of approval. Item 4 is our review of the stormwater requirements. They have provided a stormwater system. That should be a condition of approval. We're happy with the 4 dry wells, and those 4 dry wells should be provided. If there are existing ones on site, we have to verify that. Okay, 5 is our standard condition that they have to replace the sidewalk satisfactory to the board engineer. 6 is the standard condition that they have to pay the inspection escrow, and the CO is tied to the acceptance of the improvements. 7, they have to comply with the requirements of the Shade Tree Commission, Fire Department, and Public Works Department. We received a fire department review dated 7/19/23 with no comments. A recommendation from Public Works Department, 7/11/23, approval with no comments. And a Shade Tree Commission review dated 7/12/23 with recommendation for approval, and it is noted that all existing trees and landscaping are to remain, so there's no...
That's okay, the trees will remain.
It is. I just want to raise an issue. There's a tree that's growing on an interesting angle in front of the home, and if sidewalk is requested to be replaced by you, it may have an impact on our ability to save that tree. So I just want that noted for the record. We'll work it out on the field.
Yeah, we address those in the field. We don't want to impair or damage trees, so we work around the trees, and we will come up with a solution to that in the field with your engineer.
Understood.
Okay, approvals conditioned on all compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. We need evidence of you getting final HPC approval. You have to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And finally, you have to revise the plans consistent with the board conditions and submit those requisite number of sets to the board engineer for review and approval.
Craig, can we just go over one thing?
Sure.
This talk of this floor area ratio
Oh,
variance that's
yeah,
your...
yes, I would definitely like to talk about that. So my review was not a specific analysis of the floor area ratio, what was ever lawfully existing and what is proposed. They submitted a separate construction permit application that was flagged by the zoning officer, and they're working out whether there are floor area ratio issues on the site. And I think that they're digging through the history of that right now. So I just want to emphasize that we are not legalizing what is shown in my zoning table. And that analysis needs to be done. So the board is not acting on that. They didn't notice for a floor area ratio variance. We're not dealing with the D variance tonight. We're only dealing with the rear deck improvements.
All right, but on the chart, the floor area ratio says the required is .40, the existing is .54. Is that with this disputed area or without this disputed area?
I am not sure.
You know?
I have not done that analysis yet.
So can I ask Mr. Schultz that question? Because he, I think, performed that analysis.
Thank you. When we did the calculations for the house FAR, that's .547 is the calculations we came up with. And I believe that was agreed to by the zoning officer. Similar numbers. I think the only issue left is a prior application didn't show the third floor in the FAR calculations. We're showing it, but a 2010 application didn't show it.
So there were architectural plans submitted in 2010 when there was improvements proposed previously. And there was an error on the architectural plans. For whatever reason, the architect omitted the FAR on the third floor. We don't know why. So we've gone back, we've obtained building permits to show all the improvements within the home are lawfully existing. Permits have been obtained. We've sent all that in the form of a letter that Mr. Schultz provided to Mr. Britton on Tuesday. He has not had an opportunity to respond to that. Hopefully we can convince him that it's all lawfully existing. If so, we'll proceed with our building permits for the interior renovations. If not, and it's determined that an FAR variance is needed, we'll have to come back to the board for that variance.
Okay, so you're asking to be able to build the deck even if your home is in violation of the FAR?
Right, because the deck doesn't count toward FAR. The FAR only relates to improved heated space. The deck has no impact
I
on floor
understand,
area
but
ratio.
if we were just granting variances for a deck, it wouldn't trouble me at all.
You are.
Let me just finish my thought. There's 6 variances, one of which is parking. And I guess where I'm falling down is one of the critical conditions for an FAR variance is if you have sufficient parking, right? Because it's whether it can accommodate the extra space. And parking is one of the things that is an impact on floor area ratio. So I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to jam you up on building your deck, okay? I'm just saying that we're not just granting a variance for a deck. We're being asked to grant variances for lot coverage and parking, which are 2 critical things in a floor area ratio analysis.
You're not.
We're,
And let me tell you why.
Oh.
Because the variance we're seeking is only for the deck. So the parking variance only relates to how the deck impacts it. Right now, the FAR issue is an open issue. We haven't resolved it yet. If we want to put in the resolution that nothing herein shall suggest that a variance is being granted for floor area ratio, and if Mr. Britton isn't satisfied that the floor area ratio within the home is lawfully existing, a new application has to be made, we're fine with that.
Okay, I'm going to do just a little bit more than that. Okay, I'm going to say that by granting if the variances are granted here, by granting those variances, it doesn't mean that there can't be a later determination that the parking is insufficient to accommodate the floor area ratio. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I just don't want this approval to kind of flow into the next one and be like, well, you've already granted a variance for parking. You've already granted a variance for lot coverage. Because if someone comes in, either objects or one of our board members wants to say, hey, it doesn't really accommodate this extra space because they don't have sufficient parking, they don't have lot coverage, I don't want to hear, well, we got a variance for that already. You may get a variance for that in the context of a deck, but no one really knows if there's too much space for this parking or too much space for this coverage. So everybody's got to revisit that. So I'm going to put in some qualifying language about not prejudicing that future analysis. And then I think it's okay to put on a deck, but I'm just saying that we kind of have this mysterious thing laying out there, and I just don't want to.
We're not going to hold that, we're not going to hold the variances being granted this evening as part of this FAR issue against
Does
the.
everybody understand what I'm concerned about? And is that, I just don't want to lock you guys in there. I think maybe you'll be inclined, I'm not saying anything about, maybe you're going to be inclined to let them build their deck, but if it turns out the FAR doesn't work out, I want you guys to be able to do that with a clean slate and not have this come back and tie your hands somehow if you are inclined to let them build their deck, okay?
but
That's all we're
just to be clear, we're not adding any FAR to the house,
Yeah,
And,
I understand.
now or
Sir,
in history.
I understand this perfectly. I'm just saying that when you do an FAR variance, 2 of the 3 variances that are in here are the most critical aspects of an FAR analysis: lot coverage and parking. So before we go and start granting variances for those things, when you may have a FAR violation, I need to make very clear that we're not kind of jamming ourselves up later to say there isn't adequate parking or there isn't adequate lot coverage once we learn how much actually living space is in this house and whether it's permitted, that's all. So I'm trying to give you what you want, but at the same time, recognizing this issue is still lingering out there.
Understood.
If there wasn't parking and lot coverage involved, but when you got parking and lot coverage, they're the things that we spend time on a FAR application.
I think the
Okay?
key word there is may. It's an
Exactly.
open issue.
Who knows?
Yep.
All right, so I'm just going to cover us for that and try to let you do what you want to do if
I'm
they're.
sorry, Rich, can you just run through that one more time? They don't have the FAR for the house at this point?
They may or may not. They may or may not have a floor area ratio violation. Okay? They may ultimately demonstrate that they did everything up and up where it was built before the FAR existed or something, some other reason why they don't need a variance for that. Okay? I don't know all the details. I'm not sure they know all the details. It's not before you. Okay? What they're building is a deck. The deck doesn't add living space.
Right.
Okay? So normally it would have no connection to the floor area ratio. All right? For a deck, most times you wouldn't even know what's going on inside the house. Okay? For an application, it just wouldn't come up. They'd apply for a deck and then whatever. But this deck, because I'm looking at the variance chart, includes a variance for lot coverage and parking. when you guys do floor area ratios, you'll hear me talk about, well, not just me, but the experts and the attorneys and all talk about, well, you should grant this variance because the parking is okay, so it can accommodate this size house, or this size of living. The lot coverage is okay, so the floor area ratio is less offensive because the intensity isn't so bad because it covers lot coverage. But you're granting variances for those two things tonight, so I just want to make sure that that's not going to come back and bite you later for being nice tonight. So we're just going to put some language in there to that effect, and they know that I'm going to do it. And then if you guys are inclined to let them build their deck, then you can do that comfortably knowing that it's not going to come back at you later and limit what you want to say or do when they do
My
that.
question is, we grant the variance for parking, and they do not construct the deck, then they still have a variance for the parking, correct?
Well, they don't have a variance for the parking. Well, they may have a variance for the parking, but it's there now anyway. So if they never, it's as if they never came here.
And I believe the ordinance requirement for the parking only relates to when you're proposing construction. So if the deck is not constructed, it's just an existing non-conforming condition. There's no development that is
And
being
that won't
proposed.
affect your coming up with the floor area ratio number.
The language for the parking requirement, when we redo this analysis, says any addition, alteration, et cetera. So this parking variance is tied to this specific addition and alteration.
And only that.
Not the floor area ratio. So if they have a floor area ratio variance, if they did something illegal conversion or whatnot of area that wasn't supposed to be converted, then you're going to be dealing with that as the next alteration. So then you get to redo the parking analysis again.
And I want to be clear for the record, there's been no unlawful alteration here.
No, I'm not saying, I
This
just,
is a 1912 home.
I don't think-
That third floor's been there forever. Yeah.
Theoretically.
I understand.
But I mean, so we're talking through, like, the parking variance that's going to be granted tonight relates to the deck improvements, and that's it.
We agree with that.
And we don't, I don't mean to step on a tricky wicket, I just want to make clear that we don't do construction permits, right? We're going to grant this, if they grant this variance, we're granting your variance. I don't know how the construction office, if they conclude that there is a floor area ratio violation, if they're going to issue a construction permit. I don't know that, that's
So
not
that's
my
not your
area of
jurisdiction.
expertise.
I understand.
That's for them, okay?
Yep, that's why we wrote to him. We
That's-
work it out great.
All
If
right,
not,
so-
we might be back.
I'll put in language similar to what I said tonight about not prejudicing our later analysis, okay? All right, good. Go ahead.
Separate issue question.
Yes, go ahead.
On the chart that Craig put together, we have the current existing lot coverage. The current existing includes a patio that wasn't supposed to be there. Should it be 57%, so it reflects the actual?
I'm leaving it as it is, I'm putting an asterisk on it.
Right.
And on that asterisk, it says, the patio did not have a permit, but the permit that did not have the patio that did not have a permit is included in the 57%, but is not included in the 48%.
Just for posterity. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna say that in
That's
there.
why.
If I could read my own writing, that's what
the
it'll
applicant
say.
They are increasing the lot coverage from 48.3% to 50.8%. So that's what's happening.
Right. But in reality, it's being reduced.
Yes.
You got it.
Functionally, it's being
Right.
reduced.
Right.
If there's no more questions, we'll open it up to anyone within 200 feet of the property that wishes to speak.
Sir, get
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah, you have to, we have to do this a certain way, sir.
You-
No, Podium.
Sir, to the podium.
Okay,
Turn
let's
on
move the
mic.
exhibit.
Yes, it could have.
Is it okay if he sits here?
Yeah,
Well, we got it.
Sir, before you do anything, I'm going to ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. So
Please state your name and spell it.
Aloysius Stonich, Aloysius. Last name is Stonich, Stonitsch.
Okay, and what's your address, sir?
Yeah, you asked. 1216 New York.
I'll get most of it right. All right, so what did you want to say? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, we've been neighbors with Kevin and Fern for years, great neighbors, and with Lois as well on the third house. And we have no objection to them putting the kind of deck on the back of their house that Lois has on her house. And, I too would like, if I had the house, I would like to not have to go up and down 13 feet of stairs to grill a hamburger. So we're just fine with it. And it sounds like they're going to rip out the existing patio and all that stuff, and we're fine with that. So I just told Fern that I'd be happy to come in if anybody had any concerns about whether, the third of the triplets would care and the third doesn't care.
Do you share the driveway with, or are you on the other side?
No, we have our own driveway.
Thank you.
Do you have a deck?
We do not have, yes, I have a deck on the third floor.
But not on the ground level like they're proposing?
No, I don't.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Is there anyone else within 200 feet? Anyone beyond 200 feet? Okay, closed.
Okay, if there's no discussion, then I'm going to propose a motion for you. And I incorporate by reference the standards set forth in the engineer's report for a C1 and C2 variance. Although there was mention of a C1 variance due to lot width, I think this is more appropriately analyzed under the C2 standard, because I think the testimony went to the balancing more than the C1. I'm not sure the existing lot width is really, this really isn't a C1 variance, it's a C2 variance. So I'm going to ask you to consider in your mind the balancing, okay? And you have the testimony of the board engineer, and you have no testimony really in opposition. So if you're going to vote against it, that's fine. Just make sure you articulate your reasons, because they're going to only draw from the record, and right now there's no opposition. So if you're going to state your reasons against it, if you're going to vote against it, I'm not telling you you can't. I'm saying please give me your reasons so I can incorporate them in the record, okay? But the motion I recommend being made is a motion to grant the variances 1 through 6 on page 3 of the engineer's report, as set forth in the engineer's chart, which was revised to indicate that the proposed lot coverage is 50.8%, subject to the conditions outlined by the board engineer 1 through 11, and also with a special condition to indicate as follows, that the fact that a variance may be granted for parking and lot coverage will not impact any future decision to grant or not grant any floor area ratio variance that may or may not be required in a future application, and the applicant acknowledge and accept this position. Okay? I said that fast, but this is the thing we talked about for a while. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. No? All right, so that's the motion I recommend being made. About how you vote is up to you.
Can we have that motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
A second.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who motioned? Mr. Walsh? No? No. I'm sorry, Mr. Venuto? Thank you.
And Mrs. Walsh.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Venuto motions. Mrs. Notch seconds? Yes, thank you. Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience and cooperation tonight.
We still have one
Thank you,
item.
Counsel. Good job.
One item.
Good seeing you.
Everyone received the 2022 decisions.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions, any comments?
I have a question. Really. When they go through an application and it gets approved, for example, the sea glass, how long do they have to follow up on what they promised that they would do? For example, they are going to put electronic door, and I don't see one on the property yet.
Why didn't you mention that? I drove through there and I didn't see it either. And I said to my wife, I thought there was supposed to be an electric gate in the front of this.
There is supposed to be an electric gate on the front.
There is not an electric gate.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that.
That's the one with the dip underneath, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, I noticed that too. It's not there.
Okay. We will follow
What I
up.
also noticed is that you couldn't see the cars parked under it either.
I did notice that
It
too.
looked really good. But I also said, but there is supposed to be a gate there.
Were you guys talking about 933 Beach, the door?
Yes.
Okay. I just couldn't hear. Thank you.
Last weekend, my wife.
I was walking down the boards.
It's beautiful.
So any other questions about the decision list?
Yeah, I have a question too. On the local, there was supposed to be some
Litigation?
changes we approved, and I don't think that's happened either.
That project has not been signed off on, and there may be litigation with that, so
There is litigation. We had oral argument 2 weeks ago.
Are they, Rich, just expound on that a little bit. Are they contesting?
I would rather not, because we're in open session. But what I can tell you is, by next month, I'll almost certainly have a written decision from Judge Blee, and that will tell you everything. It's more important than what I say, it's what he says. But there's still a dispute over that HPC appeal. And, you know, they feel that your decision to affirm the HPC's decision that essentially required them to build it the way it was approved in 2018 as opposed to the way it is now. They've appealed that decision, and that oral argument was, like I said, 2 weeks ago. So we'll see how it goes. Okay? But that's the status of it.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
One other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm sorry, real quick, I'll go quick. Because there's some new members of the board, and you may get these questions too. One of the things you notice, although there's a few more denied on this one than there had traditionally been, but sometimes the board gets criticized for saying yes to everything, and I got a call from someone one time, I forget who, it was someone who was on the board, a commissioner, I think, I forget, very nice lady, asking me that question, and I explained to her why it may look that way. And what people do not appreciate, but which I ask you to explain to people when they give you a hard time about it, is a couple of things. First, you have a very strict and competent board engineer, so that when goofy applications come in, you never see them, because he tells them, this is ridiculous. And then he works with them to try to get them to get something that makes some sense. That's why you usually, one of the reasons you get a lot of things that actually make sense by the time it gets here. So I know it looks like we say yes to everything, but Craig's saying no to a lot of things, okay, before they even get to here. So then it gets filtered. So that's one area where a lot of things get said no to, or not no, but get dissuaded, okay? Then when they come here, and they come in with something, and you start having this conversation with them, and they start moving stuff back and mitigating the problem, right? And then they listen to the public, and then you remember we had that one, on Beach with the thing in the back, the pool house, and then they removed the whole deck, and then they made the other deck more visible through. So it looks like you just said yes, but you didn't. You pushed and you pulled, and you made it something that was more, appetite and more amenable for the people behind it. So you said yes, but it wasn't exactly what they requested, okay? So I tried to explain that even though there's more approvals than denials, it's not that not just everything everybody wants is what they're getting. There's a whole filter that goes through before you say yes.
This board has established a tenacity for denying certain types of applications. Floor area ratio. This board is very tight about, we're not giving those away. And the applicants' attorneys know that. So a lot of them won't even take the case. So they don't even bring those cases to us because of the pattern of denials that you guys have already established and the threshold for what you'll accept. So there's a reason why we don't even see those applications, and you don't even have the ability to deny them because no one's even contemplating bringing them because they know it's a lost cause.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you in case you guys get a hard time. If you ever get that question again, you have a little bit of a arsenal there to answer that, because it's true. It's true.
Prior to me being on the board, though, I heard that there were a lot of approvals and not many denials, and I'm surprised that we had 5, in 22.
Yeah, that's a larger number than had been the case. And
they're not getting pulls if they need a variance.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 of those were pools, which are getting a lot of pushback in a lot of other towns, too. People are just, trying to
Right.
limit the pools. I forget what some of those, denied swimming pool,
Well, one was in a front yard.
floor ratio denied.
These
Oh, yeah,
summaries.
they're all
while-
pools.
While Rich is looking at that, these summaries are very important at the planning board level when we redo the master plan and look at reexaminations. When, the last time I did this, we compiled all of the board approvals or denials, looked at the zones where they were and see if there was a pattern happening. When a pattern happens of you approving or denying things, we can tighten up regulations or we can loosen them up. If you guys are just granting the same old variances in the same zone over and over and over, there's a pattern there that maybe we need to take a look at what bulk and area requirements that we have there and whether they're appropriate. So I commend you on putting together this detailed list because it
Oh,
helps.
thank you.
It helps us.
It's my
It really
job.
helps us in the future, and so it's
Thank
not,
you.
it's not just a worthless planning effort.
Oh, no, it's a
All but one was a
requirement,
I
so-
know it's a requirement, but
Yes.
this does get used.
Yes, thank you. I
All but
appreciate
one
that.
were pools, and the one that wasn't a pool that you denied, I wasn't here that night, and it was the expansion of the taco place. And I could tell you a little, I mean, time to appeal, that's over, I can tell you a little background on that. I had talked to the attorney a couple times about that one, and in my discussions with him, it wasn't made clear. I won't blame him at all. I will just say that in our communications, I wasn't aware they were putting this big fat addition on it. I thought they were taking the existing structure and kind of making the upstairs into a little hotel, kind of like Peter Shields did with the thing above Caddy Corner from Finn. So it seemed, I didn't tell him, wow, that sounds like a disaster. And then when I talked to my partner about what happened that night, and I learned that they were putting in a bunch of more rooms up there and didn't have a clear parking plan, I was like, well, now I see where the direction that went. So, but that's, the rest are approvals. But do you feel like you say yes to everything? No, I mean, but what comes to you generally is sensible by the time it gets here, or you make it sensible during the meeting. All right?
Craig, has anything been talked about in planning as far as fire pits again?
Sorry, Keith?
Fire pits and planning, have they even discussed it, or?
A little bit.
They're like popping up all over town, you know?
Yeah,
Not that it makes any difference, I just don't remember the last time.
right. We're not redoing the master plan, so really our efforts have been right now implementing recommendations that are contained in the master plan. But, these recommendations can come top down from the governing body to us or from us up to the governing body. This board can make recommendations, you can forward them to the planning board and they can consider them. So if that ever you're certainly able to do that. But they've been discussed, but nothing has come of it.
I know we only had that one, and that was more
We've had
more efforts.
We've had discussions on our definition of structure.
Right.
And then, you get into, our definition of structure really includes Rich likes to point out, your barbecue grill could be a structure, and it's on wheels, it can move, so we've had some conversations about it, but nothing has precipitated out of it.
I don't think they still remedied that. I don't think they're using the fire.
I've never seen that lit, I've never seen anybody sitting there at
I
Peter
don't think
Shields,
they've moved
ever.
it.
They haven't moved it.
No.
So
We
if they haven't moved it, they haven't.
We haven't had a request to re-inspect it to see whether it complies yet or not. So we have not signed off on that.
What's that, Peter Shields? Okay.
They haven't turned the fire pit yet. That's my path to the beach. I check it every time I go. Haven't changed it.
Yeah, I asked the zoning officer, I'm like, have they done anything with this? And he's like, no.
No.
So,
No, it's
They
still the
will.
same. I walk
Probably
by
the wrong
every
time of year.
seems like they're not using it.
Right?
I-
They're not.
No.
No.
Do we make a motion? When you guys are finished discussion, make a motion to accept the report, right?
Yes.
Because you're going to do a resolution, right?
Sure.
Okay. Someone want to make that motion?
I'll make
be the
that
chair for a
motion.
minute. Sorry, Terry.
Okay, a motion to accept the 2022 decisions.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Was that, thank you, Marvin. We have a motion by Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Zexer. Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch? Ms. Sheehan?
Yes?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Can we have an emotion to adjourn, please?
I make the motion.
All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.